their third consecutive premiership and one of the all-time great grand finals on Sunday night. It's been a couple of days for us to sit back and mull on it. So Kempy and I will get stuck in very, very shortly. And then we're just going to have a look at the season as a whole. We'll run through the ladder and pick out a couple of teams and maybe teams that disappointed, teams that surprised, and where to in 2024. How do we see it all shaping out with plenty of players moving around? We'll finish off as well talking a little bit about the Kiwis with the upcoming Pacific Championships. The Kiwis have named their squad a couple of very, very light positions, hooker in particular. The thought of Danny Levi starting at hookers enough to send shivers down your spine, Kempy, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the hour. You can text through anytime on 8833 or as always on the YouTube stream. We love having you watch along. You can drop us a comment on the YouTube stream and we'll make sure we answer any questions or thoughts that you have. Wrapping up the 2023 season, Kempy, grand final on Sunday night. Best grand final of all time?
Well, it's the best one I've seen for a while. Newcastle's was the best one when they won that grand final against Manly and Albert went down the wing, I think, from a Newcastle perspective. But, yeah, mate, that's got to go close. You know, Brisbane, North Queensland Cowboys, the South's Canterbury one, which I was at. But this one on Sunday night had everything.
And we sort of thought it was going to have everything just with the two styles that were coming up against, which it was so quick. The intensity in that first half was Origin-like. And it's funny, I said that to a few mates and they said to me, well, of course, it's a grand final. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to remember that Origin is the best of the best playing against each other. The NRL is slightly different. You would think Origin has a higher intensity, but that game on Sunday, I think, almost blew it out of the park. What were you thinking when Ezra Mam scores his third try? The Broncos are up 24 points to 8.
Like everyone, I thought they probably would get home. You could see that they pulled back a little bit too, but I think that, you know, with the high completion rate in the 90s for Penrith, that they always had plenty of juice. And there was 3 changes that changed the game. The one when Luai went off, I thought if Luai stays on, they win it. Okay, because Luai was a passenger and he was overcalling Cleary all the time, and Cleary was sitting back. So Luai goes off and Cogger comes on. Cogger's an unsung hero. He was absolutely superb when he went on and pushed Cleary out one, especially on that right-hand side. So gave Cleary a bit more room to move. But then Leota and Harris came back on, Fisher-Harris came back on, and that's when Payne, Haas and Fledger were just absolutely dominating with Carrigan in the middle of the park and just steadied the ship. And that momentum swift. And I'm talking about, if you're looking at a pendulum, one's going up and one's going down. Well, when Haas and Fledger was on, Penrith were way down. They couldn't get any momentum. They were still completing their sets of 6. And they put that 24 points on. And then all of a sudden, Harris and Leota come back and they level it all up. And then all of a sudden, it becomes another arm wrestle. And that's where Cleary gets on the front foot, thanks to young Jack Cogger and the way that he played in through that middle of the park. So am I surprised at the end? Mate, you could see it coming. Like when you're watching the game, you're going, they're hanging on for dear life. Yeah. Back-to-back sets of 6. You know, the short dropouts, the errors, the captain's call was that was a throwaway from Reynolds. But that's desperation. That's what starts to happen when you're making those types of decisions under fatigue. And what got him in the end? The percentage rate. Yeah,
97%, which is just incredible for a grand final. Can be one error across the 80 minutes, and sure there was defensive lapses there at times, but they still able to get the job done, which is a measure of Ivan Cleary and this Panthers team. For the Broncos, what was it, and I'll talk about experience in a second, but was it after going 24 points to 8 up, was it them going a bit more defensively and thinking we've just got to defend this now, as opposed to putting the foot on the screw and keeping on?
Yeah,
you know?
There's a saying, Sammy, in the NRL that you've got to lose one to win one. And I think with all the young blokes that are in the side, the problem that you have now, or it's not really a problem for Brisbane, I think they're a real danger. I think they come out next year absolutely fine, wanting to go back there and win it. Especially with the amount of players that they're going to keep. I think they only lose Fledger next year.
And Herbie Farnworth as well.
Herbie Farnworth. So it shouldn't be too hard to change that around. They're talking about Reynolds being, you know, on the same boat with Sean Johnson. You know, so he's on the back end of it. But you know, when you look at the way and the speed of that game, I just think they got to 16-minute mark to go, and that became a club game again. It didn't become a shutout game. Like When Reynolds went and passed that ball to the young back rower and he gets tackled on the last, that was a massive error. That was a massive error. Did you see Nathan Cleary do that? No, he went to the side. Crichton knew how important it was to put that ball
Some
into
massive plays from Stephen Crichton.
Big plays, and I just think that they got to that back end of that game and they thought, well, we've got it done. It's more of a club game. They'll never come back here, and Penrith were never going to lie down and die. So I think they've learnt a hell of a lot out of that loss. You should never lose it at 24-8.
No.
But when you're up against a dynasty team, a legacy side like Penrith, who knows how to win them, they just weren't going away.
But this is also what we talked about a couple of weeks ago and a couple of months ago, when I mentioned about the Warriors, not winning a grand final. The one thing I talked about was that experience. I didn't care about skill, didn't care about pace and personnel, purely for experience, like Penrith. And the fact that, in the interviews with Ivan afterwards, he sort of talked about thinking that, I didn't know how we were going to do it and if we were going to come back, but just so calm, so collected. And at the end, even though they celebrated, it was almost like another box ticked for Penrith, another title, and we keep on. It wasn't like they had won their first one, which is understandable, but just that experience, I don't think anyone can undervalue. And I think now Brisbane will hopefully have an element of that moving forward. The difference between the Penrith team and every other team in the competition is how they've kept that nucleus of players together since they were 14, 15. And they've grown into men, 10 years later at 24, 25. They are, the best side who's used to winning football games. So they know how to win. That's a given. They've won 2 before, now they've won 3. That's real dangerous. No matter who they click out this year for next year, the players that come in are going to come into a winning culture. The thing with Brisbane is that Brisbane just has so much speed, mate. Yeah.
Like across the board, the pace that they play in. And I'll tell you one thing, if they had matched Penrith, and we always said this, if Penrith will strangle them if they keep dropping the ball and turn it over. There was a stat in the first half, 11 out of 11 for Penrith, 4 out of 11 for Brisbane. Yeah, and it was that type of game. They were completing under 50%. Penrith were completing close to 100. At the end of the day, Moses Leota doesn't get to that support line if Brisbane complete their sets. So he's just got too much energy left in his legs. Moses Leota and Fisher Harris don't come home and dominate the middle with 16 minutes to go. They were just too fresh. And of course, Cogger, the master stroke of this game, which not a hell of a lot of people have spoken about, is taking the centre out. Just the name just misses.
From
Penrith. That was playing for Penrith.
Targo?
No. Plays for Penrith and putting Cogger in the bench in his place. I'll come back to the name in a minute. But
Jermaine Salmon? I don't think Jermaine Salmon.
No, Jermaine Salmon was 19th man. But anyway, putting Cogger on there because of the...
Oh, Peachy. You're talking about Peachy. Yeah,
Peachy. So putting Cogger in for Peachy was a masterstroke.
Yeah.
Because it was about covering the shoulder, but also covering Nathan Cleary in that position. Because if you think about it, so he goes off, Luai dislocated shoulder, and Peachy has to go to 5'8". You know what I mean? It is then like real tough.
Yeah.
But the way that Ivan thought that through and put Cogger in there on the bench, and it played out exactly what he thought. Because you got to remember, it's Luai coming back to play in the grand finals. Another story. How he done that is fantastic. But to say, well, I'm possibly going to lose him. Instead of having Peachy on the bench, I'm probably going to have to go with Jack Cogger because Jack Cogger's going to give me more for Nathan. And it worked, mate. It worked out. Nathan Cleary, on the back of Cogger and Fisher Harris and Leota, went to another level.
Just quickly to wrap up the grand final, Kempy, just a quick word on Penrith, the ability to win 3 titles in a row, how difficult that is, Ivan and Nathan.
Well, in the modern era, I think people don't realise how hard it is to get to a grand final. Yet Penrith, I read something today from I think it was young Sorensen saying, we expect to get to the final. Like, if you can come to training in the preseason and go, well, we expected to be playing in October in the final, mate, you're halfway there. Yeah. To do it 3 times, mate, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about whether they do it another 3 times because they've got the team that can do that at this age. Nathan and Ivan, mate, you're blessed. Seriously. Ivan, you're blessed. And Nathan, you're blessed. Your dad's such a astute coach. That Cogger decision won him the grand final, 100%. But Nathan, on the other hand, and I don't agree with the immortal tag at the moment. Sammy, and there's a number of reasons why. Yes, he was fantastic in that last 20 minutes, but the first 60 he was average. He was carrying that knee injury. He missed a couple of tackles on Ezra Mann. Ezra Mann was halfway up those stairs to get to Clive Churchill.
He was, if the hard time medal existed, he'd have it.
But then the momentum swings on the back of those two front rows of their halfback, and Nathan Cleary puts on a clink the last 20 minutes. Last 20 minutes doesn't get you immortal status. Yeah. He hasn't done it for Australia. He's been picked over Cherry Evans in the Pacific Cup. He hasn't done it at origin level, and he hasn't done what these guys done week in, week out for 10 to 15 years. And I'm not saying that he can't because he's only 25, but let's wait and see what happens over the next 5 years.
I don't want to debate it with you because we're going to run out of time, but I do find the conversation interesting. Like when you look at someone like JT, who is regarded as
JT, and there's another one.
But the thing with JT is he did it at origin level. Not like he was one of the best players in the year every year, but he only won one title. Well, genuine one title with the Cowboys, the Bulldogs, in like his first or second year. But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but he won.
Nathan's just doing it in a different
origins.
area. Yeah, but he also won it alongside Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk. Like they were all together.
Yeah, but they were origin, not club football.
I know,
it's a different standard.
I know, but I'm saying that they did it at origin level, not as much at club. Nathan's doing it at club. I just think that it's sort of like. I know everyone wants him to do it at origin. To an extent, I do as well. I feel like that's a proving ground for whether or not you are at that particular level. But I still think the fact he's doing what he's doing in NRL level is
it's a darts tournament. He's at the qualifying level doing it week in, week out, and then he steps up to the pro level and he's got to do it 10 times. Mm-hmm. Like, at the
but he also needs four other immortals alongside him.
At the qualifying level, he's doing that. I agree, but they're all immortals in their own. And you got to honestly tell me, like, for me, this is a no-brainer. But if you put Jonathan Thurston, Matty Johns, and Cooper Cronk together, all right, Matty Johns didn't play with Immortals. He had Danny Badiris there, and Joey and Matty Johns was on the outside of him. Jonathan Thurston had no Immortals next to him. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
No, but this is my point though. It's a flip. So in Origin, he had all those players around him. In club level, not so much. In club level, Cleary has the players around him, make him good. In Origin, he's not so much. So what has he done
at Origin level?
Yeah, but I know. I'm just saying it's
Tedesco?
It's a flip.
So he's at Tedesco, he's at Trebojevic, he's at Latrell Mitchell.
We're going to move on. Now, look, we're going to go through some of the big teams and talk about 2024.
I love it with you.
So let's just quickly do Penrith and Brisbane while we're here, then we can move on. So Brisbane, like we mentioned, losing Herbie Farnworth, Toby Flegler, actually losing Keenan Palacia as well to the Gold Coast Titans. I actually think he'd be big for them off the interchange. They do get Fletcher Baker from the Roosters. And then for Penrith, they lose. In fact, I actually think Penrith are one of the teams losing the most next year because they're losing... They're losing Cogger to the Newcastle Knights, Stephen Cronin, of course, going to the Bulldogs, Jermaine Salmon to the Bulldogs, and Spencer Leniu to the Roosters, which is a big one. They do pick up Paul Alamotti, Dane Laurie, Brad Schneider, Riley Price. So Brisbane and Penrith, where do you see them in 2024?
I see them 1 and 2. 100%. I just think there's a different level.
Herbie Farnworth was fantastic, by the way, on Sunday.
He can play. That kid can play. So can Fledger, mate. He was outstanding. Mm-hmm. There's the game, although it was only 2 points in it, across both teams, there were so many great performances, and I just think the way that they both play and at the speed they played, that was like, you tell me the next time we're going to see a game like that.
Oh, you know.
I'll tell you what, next year's a grand final because it'll probably be there again.
And we all sort of predicted it though, Kempy. Like we all sort of said this could be one of the greats because of the two teams that were involved. And it also proved the point that these two were so far ahead of everyone else in 2023. They were. I mean, the Warriors, as great as the story was and as awesome as they did, it was chalk and cheese between Brisbane, Penrith and everyone else.
Yeah, and you know, that whole stepping up, losing one before you can win one. Like Reece Walsh, yes, he was disappointing in the game, and I know people are talking about all the bad things that he'd done, but if they had actually got home, they'd be talking about Reece Walsh.
Of course they would. Yeah.
About the swagger, and he's got 100%. The confidence, and he should be the Australian fullback. And it's the difference between winning and losing is so fine. You can't take away the talent. If he goes away next year, he's going to be hurting. He gets back to that position again, he ain't let the next one go.
We'll take a short break here on Running It Straight. When we come back, we're going to go through the other top 8 teams, look at them, how they're going to track in 2024 before we take news, sport and weather. We'll get through the rest, and of course later on in the hour we will talk a little bit of International Rugby League too. You can keep the text coming on 8833 or drop a comment on our YouTube channel as well. Running It Straight here on SENZ. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back into Running It Straight as we review the 2023 season and head into 2024. Take a look at the team's prospects across the NRL moving into next year. So other top 8 teams, Kempy, I'll sort of bunch a few of them together. Well, let's go with the Melbourne Storm, who finished in 3rd position, which is probably higher than many people would have had them and should have had them as they progressed throughout the season, but they did manage to find themselves inside the top 4 because that's Craig Bellamy. No massive losses for them next year in terms of squad movements. They lose Jaden Nikorima and Tariq Sims, but they got no gains coming in as well. As Melbourne, I don't know, are they still that team? Are they still top 4 in 2024, or does the decline begin now?
No, look, I think that they probably are a top 4 side. It just depends. The biggest question mark is around Peppernails and that compound fracture, because they're very hard to come back from, and whether he can come back from that. Apparently January is back to training, so these will be touch and go there. But I just think with Harry Grant, Jerome Hughes in those 2 key positions, Cam Munster, they still have a spine that they can surround with that type of coaching skill that Craig Bellamy has and get players to play well above where you see them playing, because the Storm have such a wonderful culture. They may not have any signings on the board at the moment, but they generally do a lot of signings right now. So during the off-season, they go into the market and they pick up a couple of players. They see what's hanging around, and then that's where they pick up the Tariq Sims, the Elisa Couture's, those type of blokes at the end of the year. So we might see a couple of signings here, but I still think they're a top 4 side.
The big story alongside the Warriors of 2023, of course, was the Newcastle Knights, your second team, can be storming into the finals towards the back end of the season. So in 2024, they lose Lachlan Fitzgibbon, Lachlan Miller, Sima Sasagi, and Dom Young, who's a big one, going to the Roosters. But they pick up Jed Cartwright, Jack Cogger, Kai Pearce-Paul, Will Price, so a couple of Super League players as well. Actually, I think they're coming in 2025. Cogger's in 2026 too. So no real gains for them in 2024. But can the Newcastle Knights do it again? Is the fairy tale a one-off, or can they do it all in 2024?
Well, we always knew that a team was going to go on the run. We just didn't pick it to be Newcastle. And Kalen Ponga, coming along and picking up the Dally M on the back end of it as well.
And not making the Kangaroo squad, funnily enough.
I know. Well, they make the Kiwi team. Like, I'd pick both him and Reece Walsh in the Kiwi team. That's the first 2 names I would have put on the sheet, and played them wherever they wanted to play. So, but look, Newcastle is such a fickle team at the moment. I think Jack Cogger, I was saying to the boys this morning on breakfast, if I was a Warriors recruitment, I'd be going after Jack Cogger. I didn't know that he'd signed for the Knights already. I think he's a great acquisition in that half. I think Ponga goes to another level. I think now that 5'8" debate is well and truly buried. Leave him at fullback and let him control a game. And they've got this recruitment drive going on about this one town, one team, which used to be there back when I was there and for decades. And they've gone away from that, where there's no culture within the town, within the outer line areas, and they're trying to bring that back. If they get that right, you've got to think, because Payne Haas comes through there. So did the kid that's just retired from Canterbury, the big guy that came down from Brisbane. Geez, I'm having a shocker with names today. And you'll
now I'm mind blanking as well.
Yeah, he's gone to boxing.
Oh, Tavita Pangai Jr. Yeah.
Tavita Pangai Jr. Like those type of forwards. If you can keep a couple of them and then add them to Ponga and Cogger, then I think they push back into the 8. But when you look outside that 8, mate, there was no Rabbitohs, no Eels, no Cowboys.
True. And
the Sea Eagles, they were touch and go for a hell of a long time during the year. I think it's going to be a long year for a few teams.
I want to spend a little bit more time on the Roosters race. So just quickly on the Sharks, finishing in 6th, couldn't sort of do what they did in 2023. Once again, really struggling against top 8 teams. They basically don't lose anyone apart from Wade Graham to retirement for 2024. So where do you sort of position the Sharks? I mean, they did make the top 8, which I thought they might not do as they started to slide towards the back end. Are they still that team that we saw last year with a glimpse of maybe making it of a grand final, or are they just not quite there yet?
Yeah, Finucane, didn't play the back end there. He's aging, so he's going to be injured a fair bit. I think everyone's worked them out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think everyone's worked Cronulla out. I think he's got to be really careful here, Fitzgibbon. If he doesn't change things up, they could probably miss the 8 next year.
Easy
nice
as
and
that.
short.
Easy as
100%.
that. Well, let's go to the Raiders first. They're losing a bunch of players in 2024. Jared Croker's obviously retiring. Matt Frawley's going up to Super League. Brad Schneider's going to the Panthers. Semi Valemei we saw go to the Cowboys mid-season, was granted that early release. And, of course, the big one, Jack Wyden, going to the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So, look, if Ricky wasn't sort of able to do a fairy tale in 2023, and I said the Raiders were committing ladder fraud for most of the season, Kempy, I can see them definitely missing out on the 8 in 2024.
100%, Sammy. I think with Ricky Stewart pulling out of the New South Wales race as well, knows the big job that he has next year to try and keep them up that end of the table. They like their halves, their hookers, not world beaters, and losing Jack Whiten as part of a club that he should have been a one club player is really going to hurt them. I thought Jack was probably their most lethal attacking weapon. So, they got Joseph Tapine and Papali'i in there, but they're going to need a hell of a lot more than that to keep them inside the 8.
And how long is Ricky Stewart's leash, as it were, in terms of, if you're the Raiders, as great of a coach he has been over the years, at what point do you sort of bite the bullet and say time might be up and we need to think about someone else? Well,
it's his time hasn't been up because he's been at the Raiders since he was a player and winning premierships, so he's drifted out and gone to Sydney City and Canterbury, but he's ended back up. He's a prodigal son, isn't he? So I think it's not up for Ricky Stewart. I think when the time is up and they are struggling down the bottom of the table, he goes into a football, general manager type role and still helps with recruitment and that because he's so passionate about the club. But next year, I think he's got his work cut out.
Right, the big one for me, both this year and next year, because I had them as minor premiers with the Sydney Roosters, and in 2024 they're not picking up anyone. They are, picking up Spencer Leniu and Dominic Young. Dominic Young signed through until 2027. Spencer Leniu only on a 2-year deal. Two massive ins for them, but they are losing Fletcher Baker. They're losing Jackson Paulo as well to the Manly Sea Eagles. I want to almost say, Kempy, and I know I'm probably going to say this at the start of 2024, I want to almost say that they would be minor premier top 4 favourites again in 2024, despite what happened this year.
Well, I think they had a lot of things go against them right from the World Cup in 2022. They come back. Joseph Manu hasn't had a year to remember. Brandon Smith has come back from the Kiwis. He's got into some type of trouble off field, which he has to sort out. And hasn't really played the type of football that we saw down in Melbourne. And of course, that's about a control mechanism down there, isn't it, under Bellamy, and whether or not they could do that up at Sydney City. And when you're talking about those two type of players not firing, and then you had the year that Tedesco's had, and then Carey and Walker are in and out, you don't know who's the half during the year, mate, you're going to struggle. And Warrior Hargreaves is ageing. I think they've got enough good young forwards there. But the biggest loss for me in 2023 isn't even on the field. It's Daniel Anderson. So Daniel Anderson, in his horrific accident that he had last Christmas, that has put him in a state where he has had to live in hospital for most of this year, has taken him out of recruitment and out of strategy. And building that club and building that team, he has a hell of a lot to do that with Trent Robinson. So Ando's home now. He's back into the normal movements of recruitment and strategy and stuff like that. So I'd say they'd start to now think about how we're going to get the best out of the players that we got, but how do we plug those holes that have been left and maybe are going to be left when Jared Warrior Hargreaves starts to spend more time off the football field than he does on it.
So what's the prediction for the Roosters in 2024?
I still think they're an 8 team, but they're probably one of the teams that can reach that pace. Because this is take G's reffing on the grand final. Like, he could have given plenty of restarts.
Fantastically officiated, by the way. Yeah.
And I'm watching the game going, give a penalty. The boys need a break. And you could give them... he's calling people offside all the time and holding players and getting tangled and all that. He only gives one in the first half. I think the only other team that I can see get to that pace is the Roosters. But, it's a funny competition. I don't know whether it's because they threw the Dolphins in it and gave them all an extra bye.
Yeah.
I just think it was a heap of different circumstances with the World Cup, the extra team.
Well, I mean, the Rabbitohs not making the top 8 is... If I told you that at the start of 2023, you would have laughed at me. You would laugh me out the room.
Well, they're the new Manly.
Yeah. And well, there's a couple others in that top 8 as well, like even the Knights. I don't know if many people had them as high as they finished, if you were bullish that they were going to make the top 8. We've got to take a break for news, sport and weather. When we come back, we'll go through the bottom half of the ladder. We'll start grouping teams together a little bit more here to speed things up. Then we will spend some time talking about the Warriors, and a few texts have come in here on 8833 on that, and we'll talk about the Kiwis as well just before 3 o'clock. Stay with us here, Running It Straight. News, sport and weather up next.
What about Jordan Ricky?
Oh, Kempy. We're just talking about the Kiwi squad.
He should be in there.
Which we will talk about. He really should be in there, Jordan Ricky, but we'll talk about that in a little mo. We're going through the teams on the NRL ladder to have a look at the prospects for 2024, to wrap the 2023 season. So we'll bunch the next 4 together, Kempy: Rabbitohs, Eels, Cowboys and Seagulls, because they're all teams that feature, well, 3 of them featured in the top 8 last year. They all feature in and around the top 8 on a yearly basis. The Rabbitohs, the big surprise there. Does it change for any of them in 2024? I know the Eels are losing a bunch of players. Souths are relatively unchanged, as are Manly, and I think the Cowboys have picked up a couple of players as well.
Yeah, look, I'll deal with the Eels. I think the Eels are losing the battle of the West. I think Penrith, players are really wanting to join those junior ranks and get them there. And if the Eels want to compete, then they're going to have to buy players in to do that. Look, they've signed Mitchell Moses. They've got Dylan Brown there. Yeah, Cuthbertson, it's much of a muchness. Everyone's sort of, again, working them out. They haven't got those X-factor players, especially in those back row spots where they lost Nuakore, they lost Papali'i, and of course they never recovered this year to get themselves in the 8. The Sea Eagles, look, Tommy Trebojevic he must be a bit of a worry. He's got to play. And he's got to get himself right, and he's got to get to that level 2 years ago where he couldn't be tackled. I think Daly Cherry Evans, because you've got a bunch of them at the moment that are on the back end of their careers. Daly Cherry Evans, Sean Johnson, Adam Reynolds, all fighting for that top 8 spot. Yeah. So it's sort of last chance saloon for the Eagles. The Rabbitohs are really disappointing. I think they lose when they lose someone like a Sammy Burgess. They haven't really got too much of an aggressor inside that forward pack in that back row. So Cam Murray plays really good, but he's not too intimidating. No. He's an 80-minute footballer. You need someone who's actually going to go out there and scare a few blokes. And I think if the Rabbitohs can get that Latrell Mitchell, they've still got a pretty good young side.
Whiten coming in as well. Yeah.
I don't mind Ilias. I think him and Walker's probably one of the best 5'8" in the competition with Damien Cook. They've got a really good spine. So I think they fight back. The Cowboys, finally, mate, they're probably, for me, the biggest disappointment. They were one game away from it last year.
Yeah.
And I thought Todd Payton, he hadn't lost any of his roster. They just showed up. They couldn't, they lost their season in the first half of it, not the back end. And if he can't get that culture changed to make sure that they've got to come out, because they lost one and they couldn't get there.
True.
You know what I mean? And this is what I mean about not understanding how hard it is to get there. Just because you made it once, or you made it close to it once, the very next year, have a look at Parramatta and the Cowboys.
So Rabbitohs, Eels, Cowboys, Seagulls, which teams of that four do you think change their fortunes in 2024? Like which of those four makes the top eight?
The Rabbitohs.
But the other three miss out?
I think the Eels will really struggle. I think the Seagulls just again a Tommy Trbojevic injury away from missing out, and the Cowboys, mate, they're like the joker in the pack. You don't know what you're going to get.
So of the four, you'd say Rabbitohs, Cowboys best chance for a top eight in 2024.
Yeah.
All right. So then the bottom five teams: the Dolphins, the Titans, the Bulldogs, the Dragons, and the West Tigers.
They fight it out for the wooden spoon
again.
You
don't think Bulldogs? You don't think they get it right or get it more right in 2024?
No, look,
Stephen Crichton coming in.
Burns the most overrated player in the competition. I think Stephen Crichton coming in. Look what happened to Kikau, and he was in and out all year. Just they need to shift a heap to actually compete at the 8. And I don't see that happening next year at all. I still think they're building. They're probably still a couple of years away from getting it right.
The Titans did impress at times throughout the season. They had some big wins as well. They do lose a bunch of players, so you can't see them. I guess the Dragons and the Tigers are still basket cases, and I can't see them going any higher. What about the Dolphins? Because they had that great start. What Wayne Bennett was able to sort of get out of them initially was fantastic. Then, of course, they tail off, and probably a big part of that is the fact that they've got a very old team and they just couldn't last a full season.
That's the problem. And we always said that the problem with the roster is it was aging, and it was about keeping them on the field, and then you get a couple of suspensions through frustration.
But some good pickups.
I think that's where Melbourne missed out. Losing both the Bromwich boys and Kaufusi really hurt them this year.
Because they got Farnworth, Tommy Flegler, and Jake Averillo coming in the Dolphins. Those are three great signings, especially Flegler.
I still think they're lacking
higher, but not a top 8.
Yeah.
So none of those teams in the bottom 5 you think go any better in 2024 in terms of a top 8?
Not at all.
All right. Who comes closest?
Out of all those sides, probably the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably the Dolphins. I know that the Titans have signed their captain and Fafita.
They got Keenan Palacia coming from the Broncos.
Yeah, but still, they've got the same spine.
Yeah.
It's
they're losing Toby Sexton, so
yeah. Just have a look at what they're competing against at the top end. The Warriors, the Storm, the Broncos, the Panthers. Cogger goes to the Knights. They got the Sharks. The most common theme with that top 6 teams there is their spine.
Daniel says Luke Brooks will be the buy of the year for Manly alongside DCE. We forgot that he is going to the Sea Eagles.
Well, where does he play?
Alongside DCE.
Where? 7 or 6?
Probably 6.
You're assuming that he's going to go in there and he's going to take a lesser role. What happens if he goes in there and he overrules DC and they get it wrong?
I can see Manly doing that, to be honest.
But I hope Luke Brooks goes there and unshackles and plays the football which we all know he can play.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing here, DCE, he's at the moment he's the second best halfback in Australia because he's just in the Aussie team.
We'll take a break now, Kim, because then that gives us a bit of time to talk about the Warriors. There's plenty to get through, and I want to get through some of the texts that have come in for them as well. So we'll take a break, come back with the Warriors, and that might just leave us a little bit of time at the end to have a quick look over this Kiwis team for the Pacific Championship. Stay with us here on Running It Straight, back in a mo. Welcome back into Running It Straight here on SENZ. We're talking Warriors now in 2023, looking ahead to 2024. Lots of texts that have come through. We've talked so much about the season in 2023, Kempy, and why it was as successful as it was. We even had a little chat about it last Wednesday on the show and looking ahead to 2024. So I'll hit a couple of these questions and we can have a look towards next year. Of course, no massive losses for them. Viliami Vailea, who is stuck in New South Wales Cup anyway, is going to the Cowboys. Of course, Roger and Chanel Harris-Tavita coming in for the Warriors, so two big additions there. The one that I'll start with, which is I think one that a lot of people share, and it comes from James. It says, boys, what do the Warriors need to do to reach the levels of Penrith and Brisbane? And that really is the equation for them now, Kempy. How do they go from the team they were this year, which was the best of the rest, to being a side that can equal Penrith and Brisbane?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look at the half pairing, Sean Johnson, I thought, had one of those seasons that he'd been chasing since he was 23, not 33, and he managed the side and got them basically one game away from the grand final with managing it consistently over that 27-week period. Then you look at the mixture around him. I still think he lacks that bloke that just turns the game on its head. Because he was that guy. So he was the guy that was turning games on its head because of his speed. Now, I think what they need to do, and this is the question that I still need answered, when Roger comes back, see, Roger hasn't defended in the centres. So he's going to have to do a heap of work during the off-season, and he's going to have to get right, and then he's going to have to come up against it. And some really good play, Farnsworth, those type of players that are playing in that position and defend stoutly to stay in the game. But then you're taking him away from what his biggest asset is his offence. So I'm not convinced that him and Chance are in the best position to be playing fullback and centre. And I guarantee you, with the way that they've selected the Kiwi team, Joey Manu probably will go to fullback and Chance will probably play in the centres. So they need an X factor. They need an X factor. They need someone with speed, because across that team, giving it to Ed Dallin on the wing to dot the ball down over the try line 24 odd times a year will still be there.
Yeah.
But the speed hasn't come in to get him to that next level.
Totally.
And with the team that we got, I can only see that speed coming in there if they move Roger to that position. So remember what Roger was doing before he went. He was that bloke that was doing all that on his own.
In a team that wasn't nearly as good.
Nearly as good.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So we know what Chance can do, and I'm afraid I don't buy into that he's guaranteed that number one position. I can see that Roger moves to fullback and Chance moves to the centres.
I love Webby for his loyalty and the way he sort of sticks with guys, but that is one thing that it can also annoy you. Like, I would have loved to see Ali Lautoa come back into the side when the edge defence started crumbling towards the back end of the season, but it was like he wanted to stick with Rocky, he wanted to stick with Pompey, who had good seasons in 2023. I hope it's not the same with Chance, where if it's clear that Roger would be better suited back, he doesn't make that switch because he's made a promise to Chance and he's trying to keep him happy. So whilst I respect Webby for that, I don't want him to be too low at the sake of the team. What about Chanel Harris-Tavita? Because Vaughan says, is there a possibility they are priming him to take over the 7 jersey once Esther retires? In which case, where do you play him in 2024?
Yeah, of course. Excuse me. Of course they do. They get him ready because there isn't that many halfbacks in the competition that can step back in the first grade. You've got to remember his, claim to fame is when Sean was out and he came in and he ran the team for the year. So we know he can do it. But again, he's got to go through another off season. He's going to have to get himself back into the game. It's on the back of a really good year for the Warriors. And where does he find himself in that team? Does he find himself at 6 fighting it out with Tamati Martin and Luke Metcalf? I think we missed Luke Metcalf in the back end of the year. I thought to lose him with that hamstring is probably one of the biggest losses that no one's ever spoken about. Or does he go to the bench and with no Bailey Sirinen, does he cover off that back row hooking specialist spot? And I'm sure they've got ideas about how they want to use that. But again, I think if you're looking for someone to come in and actually take over from Sean, I actually think it's a marquee halfback signing. Okay, yeah, that probably is what they need. They might have some salary free up to do it as well. Right, quickly, Kempy, before we take our last break, prediction then for the Warriors in 2024? I think they're still an 8 team. Top dead set, I still think they're top 8. I think they are hurting too. I just like the way that they've still got Mitch Barnett Infinite Blake, Marata no Kore, Dylan Walker. I still think they've got that experience and that solidity in the middle. And I think just if they can probably tighten up some more attacking options. They like Pompey and Berry and that are going to have to be fighting out of position because Rogers got one of them. Now, hopefully those two younger blokes can step up. I like Rocco Berry. I think that he has got a decent attacking game, but they still need something. They need an X factor person in there.
Yeah, there's some exciting players in New South Wales Cup as well. We might see them get debuts or play more games in 2024. We'll wait and see. Okay, we'll take our final break. When we come back, a Kiwi squad has been named for the Pacific Championships, so we'll have a look over that. Plenty of new faces, ones that you probably had to jump on Google to find out who they were. We'll bring it all to you just after the break. Stay with us. running it straight here on SENZ as we head towards 3 o'clock. The Kiwis team has been named for the Pacific Championships. First game is on the 21st of October against Samoa, and then they play Australia the following weekend before a final. Kempy, the squad is out. Looks very light at hooker. Danny Levi is probably going to be the starting hooker, and he hasn't played. He's only played about 3 NRL games this year. Forward pack looks okay, but plenty of players unavailable. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's light. It's light on experience. 7 possible debutants. So I don't mind Griffin Neame. I think he's a good player from the West Coast, and Matt Tomoko from Canberra in the centres. He'll take up one of those spots, I think, with Chance Nickel-Clockstead. But you're dead right around the hooking spot. Faimoinu Brown from the Canterbury Bulldogs, along with Danny Levi, who's been around plenty. He's already played 3 tests for the Kiwis. Whether or not he's up to it at this level at the moment, I'm not too sure. And the other one is, Kieran Foran at the back end of it. Is he going to cover hooker, possibly off the bench? Yeah, to me, looks all right, the 13, but the bench and that just inexperienced and a bit light.
Yeah.
And with the amount of interchanges you need to go through at international level. Yeah, I said this morning, Sam. The problem that we have with the Pacific nations is that the boys are choosing their Pacific countries, and that was always going to be a problem. We tagged that 15 years ago, and now that there's options here for the Pacific Cup, I think Kiwis need to really get back to what they do right, and that's the community, and make that black jersey the best thing that you can ever play for.
I agree, because I feel like the Australians don't have the problem of players opting out and not wanting to play. I mean, yes, they might have 1 or 2 from time to time.
Payne Haas is a prime example. He wanted to play for Samoa last year. They say, you want to play for the Kangaroos this year? He goes, yes, I want the Kangaroo jersey. Yeah. It's the brand.
It is. Well, those, as I said, internationals kick off in a couple of weeks' time. They're going to be at least some international football, which we haven't had too much of over the last 3 years, apart from the World Cup. Hey, that's it for 2023 for Rugby League here on SENZ. Kempy, well, for running it straight.
Oh, yeah, Sammy.
And
well
for
done.
Commentary, mate, you've been a fantastic partner in crime, as always. It's great to have all of you listening, texting in. It is you, the community, who keep us going. You've been fantastic. And a big shout out to Kempy. He doesn't go too bad either. Run home up next.